Hey, everybody, real quick before this episode starts, I want to tell you about something happening with Builders Lab. Now, Builders Lab was completely sold out, but because of some COVID issues with one of the groups that was coming, we had a group that backed out at the last minute. And so we have another 5 seats available. So this almost never happens. And here's the thing though, because Builders Lab is coming up very quickly, you'll have to move quickly. And so if you want one of these 5 seats, here's what you need to do. You need to go to mindstepsinc.com/builders-lab. And you can click there and order a ticket and get your ticket, or you can give us a call at the office at 1-888-565-8881. That's 1-888-565-8881. So again, we have 5 seats because the group had to drop out at the last minute. If you want one of those spots, you'll need to act quickly. You have until Friday, really, to be able to at least reach out and let us know that you're coming. If it's going to take you a little bit longer to get things together, my team can work with you. But if you want one of those 5 slots, you need to give us a call at 1-888-565-8881, or you can just go straight to mindstepsinc.com/builders-lab, and we'll leave the link open until those 5 slots are gone. All right. Now back to the episode. You're listening to the School Leadership Reimagined podcast, episode 159. How do builders like us make a dramatic difference in the lives of our students in spite of all the obstacles we face? How do you keep your vision for your school from being held hostage by resistant teachers, uncooperative parents, ridiculous district policies, or a lack of time, money, or resources? If you're facing those challenges right now, here's where you'll find the answers, strategies, and actionable tips you need to overcome any obstacle you face. You don't have to wait to make a difference in the lives of the people you serve. You can turn your school into a success story right now with the people and resources you already have. Let's get started. Hey builders, welcome to another episode of the School Leadership Reimagined podcast. I'm your host, Robin Jackson, and today is one of our most popular episodes that we do every single year. That's right, we're going to be doing the 2022 Summer Reading List. And this list is a good one. I was worried because last year's list, was slim pickings, but this year, I've read some really incredible books that have shifted my thinking and broadened my horizons and have really given me some good insight to what we need to be doing right now as educators. So for those of you who are new to the summer reading list, every single year I pick 5 books or so that are not related to education. So they're not education books. They're outside of education. Sometimes they're business books or sociology books or, other things, but they're outside of education, but that I think have real implications for us as educators. You see, if we just stayed inside of our kind of education bubble, we miss a lot of the really innovative and interesting ideas that are outside of education that really could inform our work. So I read a whole bunch and I pick 5 of my favorites, 5 that I really think have some really interesting things to say about who we are as builders and who we are as educators and can really inform our work. And I share those with you and I give you my take on those books. So that we're going to be doing that on today's episode. But before we do that, a couple of announcements. First announcement is that the door for ticket sales to Builders Lab has now been closed. At this point, we are closing off ticket sales for Builders Lab. We are full, and Builders Lab will be happening at the end of the month. But if you want to come to Builders Lab and you missed your shot this time, don't worry, because our next Builders Lab is happening at the end of January 2023, and you can go to mindstepsinc.com/builders-lab to get your tickets or to get on the wait list for when those tickets open up for our January Builders Lab. So all is not lost. Another Builders Lab is coming. But if you don't want to wait till January, then I want to encourage you to join Buildership University, because if I can say so myself, Buildership University is incredible. Builders Lab is great if you are trying to, quickly get to the root cause of a challenge and kind of get immersed and take a deep dive into the buildership model and think about understanding it and applying it to your school. Buildership University is for the implementation of that model. And in Buildership University, when you join a cohort, we walk you through step by step and help you actually implement that model in your school. So when you go to your school and you start out, you don't have a vision, Buildership University, we're going to help you create that vision. We're going to help you facilitate the mission and core values conversation in your school. And then we're going to show you how to align everything that you're currently doing in your school to your vision, mission, and core values. So the first step in the cohort is for you to get that clarity and that focus and to achieve that for your entire school. From there, we're going to help you start building systems. And the 4 key systems we're going to start out with are developing a feedback system that helps you get into more classrooms and helps you give people the feedback that actually helps move their practice. We're going to show you how to provide support for individual teachers and for your teachers as a whole so that you see them growing at least one level in one domain in 1 year or less. We're going to show you how to set up an accountability system that doesn't require you to run around and chase, check, and correct people, but it still ensures that everyone is doing the right work the right way. And we're going to show you how to set up a cultural system where you're constantly auditing your culture, looking for signs of toxicity and removing that toxicity before it has a chance to infect your culture. And if your culture is already infected, we're going to show you how you can deliberately re-engineer your school culture and make it a healthy, thriving school culture. You're going to accomplish that within the first 6 months of being inside of Buildership University. Now, we are doing our last beta cohort in June, and you'll see signs. You'll hear me talking about it in the next couple of weeks when doors open. Or if you want, you can get on the wait list for our last beta cohort by going to buildershipuniversity.com. Now, here's the reason why the beta cohort may be interesting to you. You see, over the last 18 months, we've been building Buildership University. We've been creating it. We've been very intentional about turning it into the best online space for builders ever. And it's a place where you can get support and community. I'm in there every single week doing live coaching. We have a thriving online community. I've been in a lot of Facebook groups lately for principals, and I got to tell you, it's mean out there. It's so snarky. And I'm so shocked by how mean people are to each other in these free Facebook groups. Inside of Buildership University, you have a safe and curated space. It's not in Facebook. It's not public. You're not vulnerable to being attacked that way. Instead, you have a group where you can bring real challenges. You can get feedback. You can get support. We cheer you on. We have a space where we share our wins. And so you can become a part of this thriving community of builders who are some of the kindest, smartest, most supportive people you will ever be a part of. So Buildership University is amazing. And because we are still testing out 1 or 2 things, we're offering one more beta cohort. And the beta cohort means you can join Buildership University at a reduced rate. And we consider that our pardon our dust rate, right? So you can come in at a reduced rate and you lock in on that reduced rate for the rest of your membership. For as long as you're a member of Buildership University, we'll never raise the rate on you. And that's our way of saying thank you for coming in early, being an early adopter. We're doing one last beta cohort, and that's opening up at the end of June. And if you want to be a part of that beta cohort, then you need to go to buildershipuniversity.com and get your name on the wait list. I'll also announce here when the tickets go on sale. It's not really tickets, when memberships open up for this cohort. And then when you join a cohort, I'll be walking you step by step through the entire process of implementing Buildership in your school. Anyway, so that's coming up. I want you to be aware of that. Now let's get to this juicy list. So the first book on our list is a book called Free to Focus, A Total Productivity System to Achieve More by Doing Less. And it's by Michael Hyatt. Now, we actually read this book as a part of what we do in Buildership University. So in Buildership University, we read books together from time to time. We do something called book club, and then we read the book, and then we get together and talk about the book. And again, we're trying to read books outside of education that we think might inform our work. So we're broadening kind of our horizons. And this is one of the books we read last year in Buildership University, and it's one of the books where I've seen the most implementation with our BU members. And so that's why it's made the list. This book is pretty straightforward. It talks about how you can be more productive, and everybody wants to be more productive. But what I love about this book is that it's not your typical productivity system. So it's not just, here's a calendar. I mean, he has a planner. Don't get me wrong. He's selling a planner as well as this book, but it's not about write your to-do list down and get the top 3 things done before noon and, kind of the typical productivity advice. What I love is that he starts out not by talking about specific strategies for being productive, but by helping you create a vision for why you want to be productive. And that's totally in line with what we teach inside of Buildership University. You have a vision for your work first, and the vision drives your work. So you create a productivity vision. Why do I want to be so productive? And then he talks about these 4 different zones of activity that typically kind of look at our day. And they're very similar to kind of the zones of genius idea that you've heard me talk about before. But he talks about that when you're working, there are things at which you are very proficient, and there are things about which you're very passionate. And so what he does is he says, if you look at the intersection of your own proficiency at something and your passion about it, there are 4 kinds of work you can do. There's work that gets in that, what we call the disinterest zone. And that's where you're highly proficient at that work, but you're not passionate about it at all. That's work you do every single day that you're good at. You can do it, but you're not interested in it. The disinterest zone. Then he talks about the drudgery zone, and that's work about which you have no passion and for which you have no productivity. So that feels like drudgery. Then he talks about work that's in the distraction zone. And I'll be honest, I live in the distraction zone. Things about which you're very passionate, but you don't necessarily have the proficiency at. And we spend a lot of time tinkering in the distraction zone. But the zone that he says we need to be trying to spend most of our time in is something he calls the desire zone. And the desire zone is work at which you are both proficient and you're passionate about. And so his productivity system is not about helping you be more productive at everything, but it's really about how do you spend more and more and more of your day in the desire zone. And that's why I like this book over other productivity books, because it's not about, you can be super busy and super productive and efficient at work that really doesn't matter, work that isn't important to you or important to your school. And what Michael Hyatt does in this book is he really talks about how do you start spending more and more and more of your time in your desire zone? How do you get efficient at some of the other things or remove yourself from some of the other zones and stop doing that work altogether so that you can spend more and more time in that desire zone? And so I think that's why the book has really resonated for us inside of Buildership University. And I think if you are struggling to find time to do work you really want to do, this book might help you do that. So again, it is Free to Focus by Michael Hyatt. All right, the next book that I want to talk about is a book called Compassionate Leadership: How to Do Hard Things in a Human Way. And it's by Rasmus Hogard and Jacqueline Carter. Rasmus Hogard, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. What attracted me to this book was this title, this idea about compassionate leadership. Now, we're builders here. We're not leaders. But they don't know yet. They've not met me, so they don't know that it should be compassionate buildership yet. But what I really like about this book is that it talks about what compassion is, and it talks about it in a very concrete way, not in you just have to be more compassionate. I don't know what that means. And so what this book does is it helps kind of break down, what does it really mean to be compassionate? And in particular, what does it really mean to be compassionate with people who you supervise or you are leading or building? And they talk about something called wise compassion. And I love this concept of wise compassion because it's really about 4 things. First of all, they say if you're going to be really compassionate, you have to be fully present. It's hard to be compassionate when you are distracted. So I think a lot of us want to be more compassionate, but when our teachers are stressing out and we're trying to, kind of keep everything going, a lot of times we don't take time to be fully present and sit with people and understand where they're coming from. And so the first step is, how can I become more fully present? The second step is what they call caring courage. And it's about choosing courage over comfort. That being compassionate is not about not doing the hard things. Being compassionate is about being fully present, understanding where people are, but then having the courage to do the right thing, even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. The third thing is related to that, and it's really about having candor, but doing it with care. So nowadays, people equate people who just kind of spout at the mouth and say mean things as candor. Candor does not have to be mean. And what this book talks about is how you can say things and speak the truth and have candor, but do it in a way that is truly compassionate, that truly shows you care for people, and how you can still be direct, but you can do that in a way that doesn't sacrifice the caring part, that doesn't sacrifice the compassion. And then the last one they talk about is how to be more transparent. We talk a lot about, we got to be transparent, you need to be transparent. But all transparency isn't good transparency. Like, I don't need to know everything about your life. So what they talk about is how can you be transparent in a way that that is also compassionate. And it's really about being clear. So this one is not a transparency like, last night, like, I'm not going to tell you all my business. That's not what it means. It's about how can you be clear in a way that shows care for other people. And so the book goes through and talks about that. I love the distinction they make between empathy and compassion in the book, because I think as educators, we suffer from empathy overload. We are so busy, kind of empathizing with our staff, with our students, with our families. And then we take all of that on, and it gets suffocating sometimes because we're so empathic that we absorb other people's pain. And that renders us incompetent to do anything about solving it. So what they talk about, compassion is empathy plus action. And I love that, because it's not enough for me to just absorb your pain. I should be doing something about it. And that's what truly being a compassionate builder is really all about. They also in this book talk a lot, and this is one of the things that kind of resonated with me, is they talked about silencing your inner critic and embracing self-compassion. If you're a builder, you're not satisfied with the status quo, which means you can be very hard on yourself. And this book talks about self-compassion that goes beyond, pouring yourself a bubble bath and a glass of wine at the end of a tough day, but really talking about how you can start not just showing compassion to other people, but how you can show yourself compassion when you make mistakes, when you stumble, when you don't know what to do, and how you can leverage that so that you can show up and be more fully present to continue to have that candor and transparency, and continue to have that courage to be able to go out and do hard things. And then they talk about how busyness can kill your heart. That when we're too busy, it's hard for us to stay compassionate. And I love that part too, because so many of us are busy that we're losing our grip on being compassionate to others. Anyway, it's a great book. If you're struggling with that, trying to balance how to show compassion for your staff without getting empathy overload. How do you balance being compassionate with still being able to do the hard things that you often have to do? This book can give you a roadmap to help you do that. All right, related to this book, and this book I love. I'm actually going to be rereading it this summer. It's called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, Defining the Path to Inclusion and Innovation. And it's by Timothy R. Clark. And one of the reasons why I love this is that there's just so many quotables in this book. So here's one quote I wrote down. The leader's task is to simultaneously increase intellectual friction while decreasing social friction. Like when I first read that, I wrote that down and I just had to stop reading and think about that. How do I increase intellectual friction and decrease social friction? And what I see happening in a lot of schools is the opposite. The more that we try to decrease intellectual friction, the more we're increasing social friction, right? The more we try to say, you can't teach this and you can't teach that and you can't do the other thing, instead of teaching kids how to grapple with these real challenges, the more we're increasing this divisiveness that we're having in schools right now over these issues. And so I don't know, that one quote alone, it's just in my head. I keep thinking about it because I feel like that's part of our problem, that schools should be about that. increasing intellectual friction, decreasing social friction. All right, I'm fangirling. Let me tell you about the book. It's really a book that I think does a really good job of breaking down what psychological safety really is and how to create it. And schools need that now more than ever. We always talk about, I want to be a place where kids can be physically and socially, emotionally, and psychologically safe. And we don't know how to do that. We talk about all of our SEL efforts, but at the end of the day, if kids are not psychologically safe in our schools, then they can't access all the other things that we want to give to them. That is the starting point. And so this book has answered for me a lot of questions that I had about what does it really mean to create a safe space for students, right? So he talks about, that our social context has a profound influence on the way that people behave. And as a builder, our job is to create the kind of social context that makes people feel safe enough to achieve the things that we're dreaming for them to achieve. And so he also talks about how the presence of fear in an organization is the first sign of weak leadership. Oh, think about that. If there is fear in your organization, if your teachers are afraid to speak up, if your students are afraid to challenge the status quo, that's a sign that we're not doing our jobs as builders. Then he talks about this, and I love this. Okay, so he says that in order to be psychologically safe, you need 4 things. The first thing is all human beings want to be included. And included means that they need to be, that you need to know that people accept you into the group, right? And he says that the need to be accepted precedes the need to be heard. Again, stop and think about that. I got to know you accept me before I even want you to hear me. If you don't accept me, then I don't even need to be heard by you. And think about how many of our students and our teachers don't ever get even that. They don't feel included. Think about how vicious we can often be when there's a teacher who's struggling and we've been working with that teacher for a while and we're frustrated, and maybe that teacher's a troublemaker on our staff. And so what we do is we ostracize that person. And the moment we do that, we cut off our ability to be able to reach that person and help them choose to be better. So first thing, we have to be included. If people don't feel included, they don't have psychological safety. The second thing is human beings want to learn. And if I don't feel like I am learning in this situation, or that that I'm capable of learning, I don't have psychological safety. Think about what that means for all of our struggling students. Think about what that means for our struggling teachers who may want to get better, but they've been written off because we think there's no hope for that person. I just have to get rid of that person. The third thing is they want to contribute. Again, think about all the missed opportunities we have to let everyone be able to contribute to the conversation. One of the things I love about being a builder versus being a leader is that when you are a builder, the ultimate act of buildership is to build other builders. That when you say to people, instead of go or let's go, like bosses and leaders do, instead you say come, you're inviting people to join you in building something better, and you're giving people the opportunity to contribute. I love this. Okay. And then the last one is human beings want to challenge the status quo when they believe things are wrong. Schools almost never create those kind of opportunity and the safety for people to be able to challenge the status quo. That's why I love being a builder. When you're a builder, you're stubborn on the vision, but you're flexible in the details. And so that creates a space where other people can contribute and challenge assumptions and ideas that we may have about how we need to do things. They can challenge the status quo. And in doing so, you can build something better. And so what he argues is that psychological safety is a condition in which you feel, 1, included, 2, safe to learn, 3, safe to contribute, and 4, safe to challenge the status quo. And here's the most important part, all without the fear of being embarrassed, marginalized, or punished. What if we built schools like that? What if we built schools where everybody in the school felt safe in that way? What could our schools become? And so what I love about this is that there is this roadmap to how to create that in your organization. And I really believe that every builder should be reading this book and thinking about ways that they can do that in your school. Because here's the thing, if you don't provide people with psychological safety, then this author argues you are either exploiting them, or you are punishing them, or you're being paternalistic towards them and controlling their every outcome. That pathway to psychological safety protects you from exploiting and taking advantage of people, either by being paternalistic or being exploitative. And so this protects you from unintentionally doing things that cause harm to other people. And so again, love this book. I think everybody should be reading it. Now, on the same lines about, kind of giving people the room to challenge the status quo, there's a great book that I just finished reading by Adam Grant, and it's called Think Again: The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. And the reason why I'm recommending this book is because in education, we are so good at orthodoxy, right? It's right answer, wrong answer. We know the way to educate children. Everybody is convinced that the conventional wisdom is correct and has been correct all this time. I'll give you an example. So most people will tell students when they're taking a standardized test, if you finish the test early, what's the standard advice? You finish the test early. Should you go back and check your answers? And if you see an answer that you don't like, should you change it or should you leave it alone? Well, the conventional wisdom says leave it alone because you'll end up second guessing yourself and you'll turn a right answer into a wrong answer because you second guessed yourself. What Adam Grant shows in this book is that conventional wisdom is wrong. In most cases, in the studies show that when students go back and actually change their answers, they only change the right answer to the wrong answer about 25% of the time, but the majority of the time, they change the wrong answer to the right answer. That second guessing yourself is not wrong. In fact, it helps you make better decisions. And so I love what this book is challenging me to do, because quite frankly, I'm old and I have established orthodoxy in my life around what education should look like. And it's challenging me to stay mentally flexible. And I think that if you can stay mentally flexible, if you have that agility, if you learn how to second guess yourself, if you learn how to think again, and you promote that kind of thinking in students, that's the thing that's going to help you solve some of the big problems that we're facing right now. And we're really hesitant to do that because a lot of times we feel like we should have the answer. You're the leader, you're in front, everybody's like, what should we do? And if you reconsider something you said beforehand, then people are going to think that you are waffling. And what I love about this book is that he talks about ways not only to help you begin to rethink your own assumptions, but then in the second section of the book, he talks about how to encourage other people to reconsider their assumptions. And then in the third one, it's about creating a community of lifelong learners. Now, that's a phrase we say all the time. We don't know what on earth we mean by lifelong learners. But Adam Grant has really given us a roadmap to what it really means to be a lifelong learner. So if that's in your vision statement, first of all, I think you should reconsider it. But if lifelong learners is part of what you want to do, this is a book you can read and really define, what do I mean by a lifelong learner? And creating this laboratory community where you're constantly challenging and reconsidering your notions and your assumptions so you can get to something better. All right. Okay. The last book that I'm going to talk about today is a book that it's a little cheeky. And it's called Thinking in Bets, 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 Making Smarter Decisions When You Don't Have All the Facts. Now, what's intriguing about this book is that the author, Annie Duke, looks at decision-making through the lens of what goes on in the head of a poker player. And she talks about and challenges us to consider our decisions that we make almost in the same way that we would consider placing a bet. But she makes such a compelling case for why we should do that, right? She talks about that sometimes decision-making is really hard because A, you don't have all the information you need, and B, even if you had all the information, things are so uncertain, you can't guarantee that the conditions in which you make the decision are going to be the same conditions in which you have to act on that decision. So what do you do? Now, many of us have confronted this head on when we were making real-time decisions in the midst of the COVID crisis. But I would argue that being a builder is going to require you to do this more and more. The world is becoming more and more uncertain, and there's such a rush of information that's coming past us. We may not always have the information we need. So what she does is she says we should look at decisions as bets. And that when we do that, it helps us to be more open-minded. It helps us to make better decisions and not be so stressed out about the outcome. And she just, when I was reading this book, I just kept having this, I just kept hearing myself, wow. I find myself now when I'm coaching people individually, kind of going back to a lot of what I learned in this book to help coach people through decisions. One of the challenges that I have with coaching is that I can tell you what I believe and what the principles of buildership, but I'm doing that without having all the information, right? I'm not in your school every day. I'm not following you around 24/7. So I don't have all the information. And the world is so uncertain, who predicted COVID, who predicted, all of these other things that are happening, that even if I tell you something that may sound like really great, something could happen tomorrow and make what I showed you completely irrelevant. And I struggle with that as a coach. But when I read this book, it helped me see that we have a false sense of certainty. Truth is, we really don't know half the time. We are flying blind. And that's okay. That's what real life is. But how can you make good decisions in those conditions? So a lot of decision-making books are like, oh, you do this, you do that. And they assume that the conditions are the same. But what she talks about is like, we don't have all the facts. Things are uncertain. We still have to make decisions every day. And so I love this book because it gives you a way to think about decision making, and it's backed by science. And she tells great stories too, but it gives you a way of making decisions that helps you feel more confident in the decisions, and at the same time helps you not put too much faith in the decision-making process, or but faith may not be the right word. It keeps you from putting too much stock in your decisions so that you get so tied to your decisions that you beat yourself up when things don't turn out the way that you wanted them to. You have to recognize that you're doing the best you can. And she shows you how to do the best you can so that even if the decision doesn't turn out, it doesn't mean that it was a bad decision. So if you're struggling with making decisions, if you've been getting beat up about your decisions, if you're beating yourself up about your decisions, this is a book that can help you see decision-making differently. Also, if you are paralyzed a lot of times, if you find yourself having to make decisions and just terrified of making the wrong decision, this can help you get unstuck so that you feel more freedom to make decisions and that you can trust your decision-making process. So, love this book. Like I said, you can tell from just hearing me talk, these are 5 really strong books this year. And I want to encourage you to spend your time with at least one of them. One of the things that distinguishes builders from others is that builders are always open to new ideas and nuance. And I find that the more widely I read, the better I am at education because I have all these different perspectives that I can weigh. So I would encourage you to read these 5 books. And if you've lost them or you want to go back, if you want to go to our website, schoolleadershipreimagined.com/episode 159. And on that episode, we have a brief kind of summary of each book, and we have a link to each book on the show notes. So you can take a look and order these books. I would encourage you to get these books and listen to them or read them over the summer. I think it can have a huge impact. So people are always asking me, okay, so what am I going to be reading next? So this summer, I got a lot of other stuff I'm doing. We're doing several builders labs this summer, public one, private, doing a lot of traveling. So I'll be spending a lot of time on planes. And frankly, I want to read a couple of things for pleasure. So I have a couple of things, some novels that I'm probably going to read for pleasure from some of my favorite writers. I'm probably going to reread a couple of novels. But there are 2 books that I have on my just like nonfiction summer reading list that kind of seem weird. One of them is not so weird. It's the 1619 Project. I am going to really spend some time thinking about that and take my way slowly through that book, right? I'm going to read a couple of, I've been rereading. I love Toni Morrison, so I'm going to be rereading. I'm in the middle of rereading her canon. I love an author named Ed Jones, and so he's a collection of short stories. I'm going to probably read that. There's another book, almost made the summer reading list this year. It may make it next year. I don't know. It's kind of racy a little bit, but it's a book called Relentless, and it's written by the guy who is a coach for players like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, and it's a little bro-y. Do you know what I mean by that? It's like you could be relentless. It's kind of like this bro culture, relentless. So I'm not sure if I have to finish reading. I just started it, and I put it down to do the summer reading list. I'm not sure, but I'm going to work my way through it, because one of the things that I like about what he talks about, this book is about how to become more mentally tough. If you're going to be a builder, you're going to have to be mentally tough. And how can you become relentless? How can you keep going and never stop until you reach your goal? And how do you deal with the loneliness that comes from being that focused on your goals when everybody else is telling you it's not possible? So I'm going to see what he has to say. And then if I like it, this may make summer reading list 2023. Who knows? So that's a little bit of what I'm going to be reading over the summer. I'm also going to, I don't know if you all know this about me, but one of the things I do, especially when I have a really stressful time ahead, is I read cookbooks like novels. So and lately I've been getting into food memoirs. So I just got finished reading Alice Waters' daughter. Her name is Fanny Singer, and she did a great food memoir called Always Home, and it has recipes and stories about growing up, as the daughter of one of America's most famous chefs. And I kind of like food memoirs. Very, like you can have this vicarious eating experience. So I'll probably be reading a couple of those. I'd love to hear what you are going to be reading. And if you're not a member of the School Leadership Reimagined Facebook group, you can go to Facebook and join that group. You can shoot me a message on Facebook, send out something on LinkedIn, or if you are a member of Buildership University, we'll be having this conversation in greater detail inside of BU Commons. All right, so there's our summer reading list. Go out and grab one of these books so that you can broaden your horizons like a builder. I'll talk to you soon. Hey, if you're ready to get started being a builder right away, then I want to invite you to join us at Buildership University. It's our exclusive online community for builders just like you, where you'll be able to get the exact training that you need to turn your school into a success story right now with the people and resources you already have. Inside, you'll find our best online courses, live trainings with me, tons of resources, templates, and exemplars, and monthly live office hours with me, where you can ask me anything and get my help on whatever challenge you're facing right now. If you're tired of hitting obstacle after obstacle and you're sick of tiny little incremental gains each year, if you're ready to make a dramatic difference in your school right now, then you need to join Buildership University. Just go to buildershipuniversity.com and get started writing your school success story today.